Good morning, everyone. Man, it is great to be with you this morning. What a fantastic start to our worship together. Brian, you said in 5 minutes what I'm going to spend 25 minutes doing. I could sit down now, but I'm not going to give you that choice. Little disclaimer, I've been up since 4 a.m. this morning. I've had nothing to eat and a whole bunch of caffeine. So when you go to preacher school, they say you should take off like a plane on a runway and gradually pick up speed and then take flight. I'm thinking today is more like the USS Enterprise hitting warp speed from a dead still. So just a disclaimer out there. So this is something. Mission Sunday is something that's near and dear to my heart. This is. I would venture to say, at least in the modern era, I've only been here for about 4 years, but we've had missionaries come in and speak, but I don't think we've had anything quite as emphasized and complete as what we're hoping to do this year and continue in the years to come. So I'm very excited about the exposure that y'all are going to have to many different things that are going on around us. We have, as Marshall mentioned, we've got some pretty special people in the audience this morning. Special because they've chosen in a unique way to live out a story that many of us would find pretty challenging to live out. And a little bit later on in our service, we're going to have a prayer of blessing over Chris and Crystal and Eli, who are getting ready to head back on their mission. As a father of young children, I can't tell you how encouraged and challenged I am by the faith that they are exercising in taking their little one back overseas into Africa and continuing that ministry. Those kind of stories should inspire us, should encourage us. I'm equally grateful to have the Kennards here. They drove from Lubbock, Texas, on Friday afternoon and arrived at my house about 6 last night and are going to be making a reverse journey later this afternoon so that James can get back to work on Tuesday in Seagraves, Texas, because they're passionate about sharing with you what is going on in the Adventures in Missions program. Now, I had the opportunity to attend the AIM program 20-some years ago, and was privileged to go to Mexico City, which at that time was about a 10-year long mission work. And I'm excited that James and Radonna have a legacy that they are leading, and that legacy is sitting right next to them, and their son and daughter that are here. They have one more that's not here this weekend, but Kiera in particular is getting ready to go back to Mexico City here May 16th. And she's continuing to work with that church that is still going strong and has a clear vision for reaching the folks of a city that is upwards of 30+ million people. So it's pretty exciting for me to be able to share some moments last night and reminisce about some of those memories and be able to imagine what lays ahead, what adventure is in store for Kiera. And Timothy has come back from Bolivia and finished his AIM time and is continuing to work with the AIM program, attend the Sunset International Bible Institute. And I know as parents, when I'm not there yet, but when you pull back that bow and you release that arrow and you hope you have it aimed in the right direction, how encouraging it is to see the decisions that your kids are making, James and Radonna, to further the kingdom. So, like I said, no food and a bunch of coffee, and I might lose my emotions up here this morning, but it is so great to be surrounded by these witnesses, by these people who have fallen in love with Jesus and are letting Him direct their lives. And that's not to say that every single one of us aren't in that same boat, and we're striving every day to know Christ and to make Him known throughout the world. But it is so encouraging to see those that have really taken that leap of faith and allowing themselves to be out there in that living altar of sacrifice and to spread the good news. All right. So there's real quickly, there's a few things that I hope that we can accomplish today. And the first thing I want to make abundantly clear is that Missions is who we are as a church. We've talked for the last several weeks. If you've been here, Mark has been presenting a lot of the core values, all the core values that we've kind of honed in on in this process as we look for a full-time senior minister here. And one of those things that pertains particularly to what we're doing today is the value of kingdom. We strive to share the good news in all we do and partner with others who are endeavoring to do the same. And it's not just some great idea to just have a mission Sunday and just throw it out there. It's just something that we do that's just kind of floating out here in Neverland. But it's something that is tied intimately to who God has called us to be. It is core to our values. And I would challenge everything that we do. We need to be looking at this in terms of the vision and mission of this church. How is it tying back into these core values? And missions ties directly into our core value of kingdom. What do we long for here on earth? That God's will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. And that is that will permeates this globe. More and more people are coming into this kingdom. And God's possession over the hearts and souls of His creation is growing and increasing on account of the fact that He has called us into His love, and we haven't hoarded it. We haven't stayed there with our bucket of living water, but we've gone back into the towns and we've shared the good news that Jesus Christ has come. So, with that, there are three things I hope that can be accomplished this morning. One, we want to inspire you. We have a lot of ministries out here, but I don't know, and in our missions committee, we've tried to take up the challenge in a process like this to really help you understand what we are doing, what our efforts are going towards, so that you can develop not just a head knowledge. Well, we know Westside is doing X, Y, Z, but so that you have that heart connection with what we're doing. And so inspiration, this is a little anticlimactic, but that's my job this morning, is to inspire you. So that's the why. And I'm kind of leading you through kind of how these classes and how we hope this day unfolds. We also want to inform you. And I'll say a little bit more about this before we dismiss this morning, but when you go to what would be a partial class, if you are going to a class, or if you go straight into the activity center, there's a time for you to get that knowledge and get that information and understand not only the things that we are doing, but the things that we could be doing and the possibilities for you to get involved. So we want to inform you. And finally, we want to include you. This isn't just to fill your head with knowledge, but we want the way this kingdom is going to grow, the way this core value is going to be lived out, is if every single one of us choose to be included, choose to be involved. And so we wanted to make sure that as you get informed and as you explore these opportunities, that you have that opportunity to make a commitment and get involved in the declaration of the gospel of Jesus Christ to all nations. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation where you were homeless, where for one thing or another outside of your control, you were incapable of supporting yourself, where you had been maybe fired from a job or harassed by your government, like that would ever happen. You've been generally oppressed by everybody in a position of power that you've ever known. You're scraping by on the mercy and the good graces of someone who might choose to have compassion on you. And you happen upon one day in which you find the mother lode. You discover the riches of the earth that is going to take care of you for an eternity. How would you handle such an encounter? How would you handle such a find? Don't give me the Bible answer now. Tell me what's really in your heart. Enthusiasm, absolutely. Anybody say bank in the Cayman Islands, all that kind of stuff? Yeah. We're gonna protect that, right? What do we owe the rest of the world? Look at what they've done to us. Run off and hide it. Take care of me, myself, and I. And sadly, that's what maybe some of us this morning. That may be our initial reaction to such a find. Again, it's a little biased, isn't it, to be asking that question on a Sunday morning when our hearts and minds are fixed on these things. But when we take a step back and we think truly, where is our heart, and how would we handle such a situation? And if we really imagine the depravity that we could find ourselves in and the loss of all these things, and to come across this, it could be a very natural reaction to want to hold that real close to our chest. And so I just want to, as you think about that, keep that in mind as we look in 2 Kings chapter 7 this morning. And I want to run through one story with you this morning, and I'm gonna go back one slide and just hold that as a placeholder, and kind of set up the context, what we're looking at in 2 Kings chapter 7. As we come upon the scene, we're dealing with a story where Elisha has been intimately engaged in a lot of activities related to the northern kingdom of Israel, which is led by the king Jehoram. Now, Joram is established out of the city of Samaria, and he is currently embattled with Ben-Hadad of Aram. So the Arameans are just, it's an onslaught. They're going after the Israelites. One of the challenges, and if I know David and Faye Tucker had a chance to go over to Israel, and they got to visit some of these towns that are, and what you'll see over in Israel in a lot of places, especially the key areas, like Masada, for instance, is they're called tells. You've heard of Tel Aviv. These tells are cities that are built on cities that are built on cities that are built on cities. And what would happen over the course of time in these really influential trade routes is one enemy after another would come in, sack the city, they would demolish it and press it down, and then they'd build their new city over the top of it. And so there's one in particular, pretty close to Mount Carmel, was a particularly influential area, and I may be a little bit off here. I think there are dozens, and I think at the time they had excavated about 25 or 30 different civilizations that had built right on top of one another. So over the course of time, you had these cities were all built on a hill. That was advantageous from a defensive standpoint because it was pretty easy to defend yourself if you were locked in and walled off and on top of a hill. But it was it came with some major disadvantages if you didn't have a water source inside that hill. And so if an enemy was strong enough and could outlast you, what they would simply do, there was often not even a battle to be fought, is they would just blockade. There would be nothing going in and nothing going out along this trade route, and they would just completely close off those cities. And that's what we have in Samaria in 2 Kings chapter 7, is that they had been there so long that they had blockaded everything that people were starving. It'll say, this puts it in perspective. It'll say, if you look back in chapter 6, sometime later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria. There was a great famine in the city. And that wasn't because it just didn't rain on that one area. It was about that siege, that surrounding of the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver. And in today's equivalent, that would be about $556 for a donkey's head. You're not going to get a whole lot to eat off of a donkey's head. So that's a pretty high price for a very little bit of food. And then to make matters worse, a quarter of a cab of seed pods sold for 5 shekels. Now, what in the world are seed pods? Seed pods, and a quarter cab of those are equal to a half pint of dove excrement. $35. Get your half pint of dove stuff. That's how bad it had gotten. You can imagine this to this degree that we're going just to try to find something to sustain our family. And things continue to get worse. As chapter 6 comes to a close, the king of Israel is passing by on the wall, and a woman cried to him, "Help me, my lord, the king." And he says, "What's going on?" This lady says, "Well, I made a deal with my neighbor who said, we were starving, and I said, we'll sacrifice my child and eat him today as long as you promise to do the same for me tomorrow." But she won't do it, king. She won't keep up her end of the bargain. And of course the king, even as non-God-fearing as many as these kings were, just ripped his clothes, just in devastation of what his town, what his city, what his nation was coming to. And he had it out for Elisha. He didn't want anything good to come of Elisha. In fact, he had plans on killing Elisha the prophet, because it wasn't too long ago that Elisha had brought in a whole bunch of these Arameans who had surrounded Elisha and his servant. They were coming after Elisha. Elisha at this time, he didn't have friends on any side. And so the Arameans surrounded Elisha and the servant, going after Elisha, but God opens the eyes of the servant and Elisha, and there's this great spiritual army in the hillside, if you remember this story. And the Arameans are struck with blindness and are literally brought into Samaria, into the same town in which they find themselves under famine right now. And do you know what Elisha did for this army once they got in there? He gave them a great feast and he sent them away. And here it is a short time later that this same city which was preparing a feast for its enemies, are now at a point where they themselves don't have anything whatsoever to eat, and their people are resorting to the most atrocious acts in order to find sustenance. So no wonder the king is mad at Elisha. But Elisha says, "Hear the word of the Lord." Chapter 7, verse 1. This is what the Lord says. "About this time tomorrow, a sea of flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." So a sea of flour, if you look in your footnotes, about seven quarts for an ounce, what would be an ounce of silver. So actually, I think 2/5 of an ounce. But you can see, obviously, a dramatic change is about to happen, and Elisha has prophesied this. So how's this going to go down? Well, read with me in 2 Kings chapter 7, verses 3 through 8. "Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, 'Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die.'" What's their thought process? We're dead already. This is our only hope. "At dusk," verse 5, "at dusk they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, not a man was there. Not a man was there, for the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, 'Look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us.' So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp and entered one of the tents. They ate and drank and carried away silver, gold, and clothes and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid them also." So here we found our scenario, right? What would you do if you came upon a gift that would set you for life? What would you do if you're these lepers outside the city gate, not able to approach anyone in town, being a social outcast for however long you've had this leprous disease? Nobody, or very rarely, showing you any kind of mercy. You made this decision. You made the brave choice to go into this enemy encampment, and you're rewarded for that bravery. What would you do? Well, we've seen what their natural inclination was, right? Eat, drink, be merry, hoard the money, hoard the silver, hoard the gold, run off and hide it, put it in the bank accounts. Listen to what happens next. Verse 9. Then they said to each other, "We are not doing right. This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace." I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was about that moment. And I don't know if it was one voice of the four or if it was all four that just the light bulb went on. And they realized in the midst of all that wealth and this delivery that there were some folks back there who hadn't treated them well, that had outcast them. They had no relationship really, living outside the gate, but there were some folks suffering in the city. And they knew that they couldn't lay their head down at night. They couldn't rest easy. They couldn't have any peace knowing that they had this good news and hadn't shared it with the rest. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. And as the story unfolds, it took a little bit of trusting effort on the part of the king. They think they're maybe going to get ambushed, but they hear the word of these lepers. They go out. They indeed find that the camp is abandoned. And as Elisha declared, his prophecy came true, and those prices recovered dramatically. So this is really kind of the world's easiest application for a preacher. So there's no secret where we're going here as we look at the scenario. But what would you do? What do you understand about what you've encountered in Jesus Christ, and how is that motivating you to just look what I found? Look at who I know, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who's rescued me, who's taken me out of my sackcloth and put a crown on my head. Or do we find ourselves more in the position of the older brother in the story of the prodigal son, who, though he has everything, doesn't realize what he has, and just simply chastises those that are making bad decisions and have left and come back and are receiving the grace of God? What's our attitude like? Are we realizing the good news that is in our possession, and are we allowing that to shape and transform us? Or are we sitting on our fortune? Where are you at this morning? Are you sitting on your fortune? I want to eliminate a few excuses this morning. If you are sitting on your fortune, why? Why? We celebrated a couple of weeks ago Jesus' resurrection. We celebrate it every day, but in particular with Easter, it was emphasized that Jesus is alive. And we talk about what that means for us. And that's a wonderful thing, but I don't think we always internalize that to the point where we start to ask the question, what does that do to us? It's great to receive the gift, but Jesus' resurrection and the gift that he gives us is given to us in order to transform us so that we can go out and transform the world through the Christ-likeness that exists in the body of Christ. He's chosen us He's called us into that mission, not just to receive the wonderful gift of life through Him, but to allow that wonderful gift to transform us so that we can transform the world. That's our mission. Jesus is alive, and the world is wondering, is it really true? And the only way that they're going to know that it's true is if His church, if His body is alive and not dismembered from the head that is Jesus Christ. If He is truly leading us, if we truly understand that gift, then the resurrection of Christ will be clearly evident in the deeds, words, and actions of His people. If we're sitting on our fortune, why? Do we think that everybody already knows that this is a Christian nation? Do we really believe that? We maybe convinced ourselves of that once upon a time. But even here, right in Bakersfield, which I would venture to say in terms of Christian population is probably one of the stronger cities in the state of California. And if you remember some of the statistics that we've shared with you over the last few months, coming from the studies we've done as a search committee, 52% of the 344,000 that reside in this city claim no religious affiliation. 52% in Bakersfield. Well, everybody already knows. There's plenty of churches out there. Don't fool yourself. Don't let that be your excuse. Why are you sitting on your fortune? It can't be because people don't need Jesus. It can't be because you truly think that everybody out there already knows who He is. It's just simply not the case. The need is urgent. Are you sitting on your fortune because you're afraid of rejection? Every Sunday we celebrate the one who was rejected by men. The one who calls us to go into the world is the one who most understands that, yet he was committed to his mission. And we must be inspired as well to remain committed. Isaiah, when he says, "Here am I, send me," as he answers the call of the Lord, he says that up front, and what's the Lord's commission to him? You're going to go and tell these people, and what's going to be the result? They're going to have ears, but they're not going to hear. They're going to have eyes, but they're not going to see. And he says, I don't care. You keep talking, you keep telling, you keep proclaiming who I am. See, rejection cannot be our excuse. Fourthly, do we think that we're not equipped? I think one of the most beautiful things about the story in John chapter 4 that we talked about during communion is here you have this woman who was just immediately introduced to Jesus and His love and His knowledge of her. And what is she capable of doing upon a brief encounter with Jesus? Changing the outcome, rewriting the story of the town that she lives in. Look at these lepers. What did these lepers know? What did these lepers experience? Did they have a degree in theology? Did they have to go to school for 13 years in order to be able to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do you understand how just a brief encounter with the love of Jesus can transform our lives and equip us to share the good news? You do not have to make it more complicated than it is. If you think, well, I'm just not prepared, I just haven't studied enough, I haven't had this opportunity, I haven't done that, there are no excuses. If you have encountered Jesus Christ, your excuses are gone. Because His love alone has the power to open our mouths and to change the lives of those around us. Think about what happened to this city in Samaria on account of one decision, on account of one piece of news, one statement, going from sacrificing their children to now having life, having food, having hope for the future, because they made one choice, because they opened their mouth and they shared the good news. Do you understand that they literally rewrote the history of that town? People are alive because of their message. Do you understand, spiritually speaking, what you have the power to do when you tell people, Jesus loves you? You can rewrite stories, church. And don't get caught up in denomination this and so thinks that, and I'm trying to prejudge whether they're ready for that. I'm telling you, right here in our midst this morning, there are people that don't know Jesus the way that they need to know Him. Don't worry about the results. Don't draw your own conclusions. Let God handle that. Love them with Jesus. And what a story you will write into their lives. And in the end, we're not going to talk about you, but we're going to talk about the one that everybody wants to be talking about. Our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. It's powerful, church. Don't sell yourself short. Don't sell yourselves short. The Spirit of the living Christ lives in you. Who can stand against you? Nobody. Nobody. Do you have any excuses this morning, church? Have you stumbled? Has anybody in here, show of hands, have you stumbled across some pretty good news in your life? Is it worth sharing? Can you share it? No excuses. No excuses. I'm so excited for what's to come. I'm going to close now. So warp speed, right? We just took off and bam, we're out of warp speed. What we're going to share as we conclude here this morning, we're going to sing. It's not going to be our traditional invitation. Obviously, I hope you've heard the invitation. The invitation is to get out there and share, to get involved, to get active, and to share the good news. But we're going to have a song. We've got a special treat this morning. We've got some kids that want to bless your lives, because this is not an adulting thing. Okay, I know that's like a key word right now. I don't want to. I'm tired of adulting. Well, it's not just an adulting thing. This is a whole family group effort, and we really wanted to incorporate our kids in blessing your lives this morning. So I'm going to ask Rich, if he would, to come up and lead us in a song, and the kids will take the stage.